Hello and welcome to Forbes Frequently Asked Questions in relation to the Coronavirus Act and business tenancies. I'm Michael Chambers, Partner, Head of Dispute Resolution. I'm joined by Laura Hallett-Lee, who is our property expert, and Laura is going to tell us more about the Act this morning and answer some of those questions. Laura, do you want to start by telling us what the Act actually says?
So Section 84 of the Coronavirus Act deals with business tenancies, and it puts in place a moratorium. So that's a period whereby a landlord cannot forfeit for rent arrears or any other sums due under the lease for a period until the 30th of June. So it sets a stay where a landlord can't take peaceful re-entry. In fact, shall we move to the questions?
Thanks, Laura. So the first question, and one of the things that our landlord clients want to know, is do they have to give their tenants a rent-free period at this time?
So the short answer to that is no. There's nothing in the Act which precludes rent payments. Rent will still fall due as normal under the lease. However, lots of landlords are agreeing to either a rent concession completely or a time to pay, monthly payments rather than quarterly. It's been agreed mainly with leisure and retail tenants just to help them out and also to maintain that relationship, though it isn't something you have to agree, and rent still falls due in accordance with the lease.
Thanks, Laura. So in relation to the moratorium, does that apply to all payments under the lease?
Yeah, so it doesn't just apply to what we call pure rent. It applies to interest, service charges, costs, any payment that a tenant would normally make under the terms of the lease. It also covers past payments, so if there's old rent arrears, they will be caught by this moratorium period as well.
Thanks, Laura. And the moratorium itself, does that apply to all business occupiers?
I think the intention was that it would cover all occupiers, but in fact, the way it's worded, it doesn't cover tenancies for a period less than 6 months. It doesn't cover licensees, and it doesn't cover agricultural tenancies either, so farming tenants are not included in the Act, unfortunately.
Okay, Laura, so next question is in relation to rent arrears. Where there are rent arrears, is a landlord still able to chase those, or is there a risk that the landlord will end up waiving their rights?
So luckily, for the first time, we are able to advise landlords that waiver is not an issue. Waiver is where a landlord acts as if the lease is continuing by demanding and accepting rent or other ways of enforcement. It's not an issue. Section 84 specifically deals with that and says that a landlord cannot waive their right to forfeit, aside from expressly doing so in writing. So this allows landlords and tenants to come to mutual arrangements without that fear of waiving their rights. That's good news.
Great, thank you, Laura. What happens when the moratorium ends?
Well, who knows where we're going to be on the 30th of June. It might be extended. So at the end of the 30th of June or such extended period, a landlord can forfeit as normal. So you look back to your lease terms. Normally rent is payable quarterly in advance, and the next rent payment is the 24th of June. Most leases provide that a landlord can forfeit either 7, 14 or 21 days after rent is due. So at that period after the rental payment is when a landlord will have to be careful not to waive the right to forfeit, and in effect, if they want to forfeit immediately at that point. In reality, tenants may just catch up and pay rent on the 30th to clear it, and the landlord can't then forfeit.
Okay, thanks, Laura. If a landlord wants to agree a rent concession, how should this be documented?
So it's very important that the rent concessions are documented, usually by way of side letter, and that should set out not only that there is a concession in place, but the exact terms of it. Not doing this can lead to litigation in itself and disagreement between the parties. We need to document the fact that there has been a rent concession, whether that be monthly payments rather than quarterly. We need to do things like interest, who pays the costs, what happens in the event of a default, how can we extend that period, how can a landlord or tenant bring that arrangement to an end, we need to be very careful to get all of those terms boxed off in a side letter or deed of variation.
Okay, Laura, thank you very much. This is the last question. Landlords are noticing that tenants are arbitrarily stopping to pay rent and want to know what happens to those rent arrears that accrue and when do they become due?
So hopefully you have a side letter that tells you exactly when they're due and when the tenant has to catch up. In reality, if you don't, then the tenant may just make all the payments due on the 30th of June and that's done and over with. Interest should still be payable though. If there's no arrangement in place and you don't wish to come to an arrangement with your tenant, then the payments are due and they're already overdue, so you have all your options available in the lease. Obviously, you can come to some kind of arrangement in respect to the arrears if you wish, but those payments will be overdue and accrue interest. So if that's the final question, thanks for your time. And if you'd like to get in touch, my details will appear alongside this recording. Take care and stay safe.